So welcome to scag's Toolbox Tuesday. Today's session focuses on expanding zero-emission vehicle infrastructure in under-resourced areas, and will feature speakers from SCAG and the New York City Department of Transportation. My name is Jasper Dwyer. I'm a regional planning intern in the Performance Assessment and Monitoring Unit at SCAG, and I'll be kicking off today's session before we begin our presentations. While we preview the session, I encourage you to introduce yourself and say hi to each other in the chat. So just for some meeting housekeeping, today's session will be about an hour and a half or less. There will be opportunities for questions and answers at the end of the session and at the end of each presentation. If you have a question during a presentation, we encourage you to type it into the chat and we will voice them at the end of the session. Today's meeting will be recorded and the presentations and session recording will be posted on SCAG's website and also sent to everyone who registered for the event. I'd now like to offer a land acknowledgement. We're currently on occupied and unceded land of Indigenous peoples who are and have been the traditional caretakers of the land in this region. So I am calling in from Juaneño and Tongva Gabrieleño land. If you haven't already, I encourage you all to visit the resources shared in the chat to learn more about the land and Indigenous communities where you live. So at this session is part of our equity series of Toolbox Tuesdays. So I'd like to frame this session within SCAG's equity efforts. In July 2020, SCAG's Regional Council adopted a resolution affirming its commitment to advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout Southern California. This led to the development of a working definition of racial equity and the Racial Equity Early Action Plan. The Early Action Plan includes 4 goals and 3 strategies to advance racial equity through SCAG's policies, practices, and activities. One of the goals is to encourage racial equity in local planning practices, which is what we aim to do through these equity-focused Toolbox Tuesday sessions, some of which are listed on this slide. You can access the previous Toolbox Tuesday sessions through the link in the chat. So I'd like to give the audience a chance to provide more information on their background and work related to zero-emission vehicles, which we'll do through a quick poll. So there are 4 poll questions. So I'll give everyone a minute to fill those out. And please make sure to scroll all the way down to make sure you answer all 4 questions before pressing submit.
Just Jasper, so you know, I only saw 2 questions pop up, but
Oh, really?
I think they'll be
Okay.
shortly.
Okay, we're gonna launch the next 2 questions shortly, but so it looks like where everyone is located, it looks like a lot of people are from local government and also the private side. And then a lot of people are from the SCAG region and outside of California, but also outside elsewhere in the US. So let's end this poll and go to the next one. Okay, and about 80% of people have participated in this poll, so it looks like most people joining their jurisdiction is not currently considering implementing an EV sharing program, or they don't know. So this will be great to learn about how your jurisdiction can implement an EV car sharing program. And we can go ahead to the next question, I believe. Yeah, so does the jurisdiction you work in or live in have pole-mounted and or curbside electric vehicle infrastructure? So it looks like around half of people, their jurisdiction does have pole-mounted and or curbside electric vehicle infrastructure. So that's great, but of course it can always be expanded. So we will love to hear lessons on expanding this infrastructure. Oops, I accidentally closed the shared window, but that's pretty much it for that presentation. So I'm going to launch the next presentation now. Give me 1 minute.
Does it include private property owners or just government funded charging stations? I think we were talking about pole mounted, meaning, I mean, we'll get into it, but on using like public utility, if that answers that.
Yeah, and thanks so much, Annalie. It's a little hard for me to read the chat right now, so thanks for taking care of that question in the chat. So hi everyone. So in this presentation, you guys can see my screen, I'm hoping. In this presentation, I will discuss advancing equity in the transition to zero-emission vehicles. So the environmental justice team here at SCAG was interested in gaining a deeper understanding of equity considerations around ZEVs in the region. So I conducted a research project to understand the extent of the issues and start to identify some potential solutions. Firstly, I'd like to start off by defining some different types of zero-emission vehicles. There are a few different types of zero-emission vehicles, including battery electric vehicles that run on electricity and can be recharged from an outside energy source. And then there are hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, which use a hydrogen-powered fuel cell instead of an engine. Additionally, there are near zero-emission vehicles, sometimes called plug-in hybrid vehicles, that combine a conventional gasoline or diesel engine with a battery that can be recharged. And our regular diesel and gasoline cars are considered internal combustion engine ICE vehicles. Now to define different types of electric chargers, level 1 chargers are typical of most standard North American household outlets. Level 2 chargers are typical of most outlets used to power a clothes dryer or an oven. And then direct current DC fast chargers are the highest powered chargers on the market and can typically provide a full charge to a BEV in about 30 minutes. And then pole-mounted chargers refers to charging on the side of a road or sidewalk where the charger is attached to a streetlight or other type of pole. These can have different levels of power outputs. So now to discuss the transition to ZEVs. Advanced Clean Cars 2 requires all new passenger vehicles sold in California to be zero-emission vehicles by 2035. As this chart shows, the state of California hopes to gradually reach 100% of new vehicles sold to be ZEVs by 2035. Equity in ZEV adoption is vital for ensuring that all California residents, particularly those most affected by pollution and economic challenges, can participate in and benefit from the transition to clean transportation. It is also critical to monitor emerging technologies for unintended consequences and ensure that priority populations are not disproportionately impacted or burdened. So now to discuss some equity gaps in ZEV usage and infrastructure in the scag region. In the United States, higher income areas and non-disadvantaged communities have the highest rates of ZEV adoption. In the scag region, electric vehicles tend to be owned in the affluent coastal areas of Los Angeles and Orange counties. According to a statewide study prepared for CARB's research unit, researchers found that lower income households are more likely to own and hold on to higher emitting vehicles due to their lower purchase costs, and thus are likely to bear a disproportionate burden of transportation-related air pollution when compared to higher income households. Across the United States, white majority census blocks are 1.5 times more likely to have access to public charging infrastructure than Black and Latino majority census block groups. Priority populations renting in multifamily dwellings often face challenges to installing charging, making areas dense with apartment complexes more likely to be charging deserts. And charging deserts are areas that lack easy, widespread access to ZEV chargers and fueling infrastructure. The map on this slide shows these charging deserts by need in the Los Angeles metro area. Additionally, low-income homeowners also face challenges in installing personal charging infrastructure due to high installation costs. Next, priority populations experience significantly lower per capita air pollution-related health benefits from ZEV adoption compared to less disadvantaged populations. And this disparity is partly due to the disproportionate concentration of fossil fuel plants and roadway infrastructure near priority populations, exposing them to pollution burdens. Next, many ZEV purchase incentives are given post-purchase, making them less accessible to low-income buyers and some give greater incentives to higher income buyers as well. Next, BEVs weigh hundreds to thousands of pounds heavier than similarly sized ICE vehicles because BEV batteries are heavier than diesel engines. According to a 2011 study published by the National Bureau of Economic Research, the baseline fatality probability increases by 47% when vehicles are 1,000 pounds heavier than average. So as 70% of SCAG's regional high injury network segments are within or adjacent to priority equity communities, BEVs posing greater risks of life-threatening injuries disproportionately affect priority populations. So the map on this slide is a screenshot of SCAG's regional high injury network, where you can see that many of the high injury network segments are concentrated in priority equity communities and SB 535 disadvantaged communities. So now onto some user perceptions and attitudes. According to a statewide survey of 3,000 households in priority populations conducted by UC Davis, the majority of survey respondents had not considered buying a ZEV, lack adequate knowledge to make a decision about purchasing ZEVs, and are generally unaware of the incentives. There are also negative perceptions around the availability of charging infrastructure, access to home charging, and driving range. So what are some potential solutions to advancing equity in the transition to ZEVs? Some ways to make ZEVs more accessible are targeted community outreach to bridge the knowledge gap in benefits, incentives, and community engagement regarding charging station siting in areas with lower ZEV adoption rates could improve equitable outcomes. Next, income-based subsidies like strict income caps and manufacturers' suggested retail price caps are the most equitable subsidies as they primarily benefit the lowest income groups. The Clean Cars for All program increased rebate allocation in disadvantaged, lower income, lower education, and Hispanic communities through incorporating lower income caps, more progressive rebate amounts, and expansion to the used car market. The enhanced fleet modernization program has been highly successful in raising rebate allocation rates for priority populations, indicating that these equity considerations do work to distribute rebates equitably. Additionally, ZEVs can be made more accessible to those who cannot afford to purchase a personal vehicle through ZEV car sharing programs strategically sited in disadvantaged neighborhoods. We will hear from our Future Communities pilot program team at SCAG about Blue LA today. Some other ZEV car share programs are EV in Minnesota and MioCar in the rural San Joaquin Valley. Next, I'll discuss some strategies to expand charging infrastructure to priority populations. There are some federal funding initiatives like the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, which is designed to address charging infrastructure gaps in rural and priority equity communities by requiring a percentage of charging developments to be in priority equity communities. But please note that the current administration has put this program on pause right now. Additionally, ZEV charging infrastructure at workplaces helps address charging deserts by expanding access to those without personal ZEV chargers. Additionally, pole-mounted and curbside charging infrastructure is a cost-effective and space-efficient means to more equitably distribute and adapt electric charging to existing infrastructure. Today, we'll hear from the New York City DOT about their curbside level 2 EV charging pilot. A similar initiative in the SCAG region is the Los Angeles Streetlight EV charging stations. Next, expanding home charging to multi-unit dwellings is important because home charging is the most frequently used, most convenient, and cheapest mode of charging infrastructure that will benefit priority equity populations. California has updated building standards to require all new multi-unit developments to have a percentage of parking spots to be EV capable and EV ready. Rebates on residential charging installation are influential as well. Various local power providers provide rebates of $200 to $4,000 on residential BEV charging installation. Next, charging pricing can be standardized and more transparent. Public charging stations are often managed by different private companies, leading to inconsistent fee structures. Similarly to gas station signage, local governments could promote transparent and consistent fee structures and signage, which are also accessible to those without credit cards or smartphones. So to mitigate those increased safety risks from heavier BEVs, jurisdictions could benefit from taxing heavier vehicles through implementing lighter vehicle weight limits to decrease crash fatality probability and registration fees based on vehicle weight. Washington, D.C. has implemented vehicle weight taxes, which are expected to bring in $9 million, which will be directed towards increasing road safety. To better analyze and measure progress for the equitable expansion of charging infrastructure, MPOs and other jurisdictions could develop metrics on charging deserts and concentration of chargers and fueling stations per capita. So for some key takeaways of this presentation, government has an important role to play in making sure that benefits of ZEVs are equitably accessible to the entire population. And examples of some of these solutions are already starting to be implemented and will be presented today. So equitable ZEV adoption not only advances pollution reduction goals, but also ensures that priority populations most impacted by environmental and economic inequities can participate and thrive in a cleaner and healthier future. So that's it for this presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they would like to share? Feel free to send them in the chat. I'm just going to flash the references on the screen while I read the chat for any questions. Okay, looks like we only had one small question that thankfully was addressed by the audience and Annalie. Thank you so much, guys. And give me 1 second. So thank you all for listening to that presentation. So now to introduce our next presenters. So Shannon McAlpine is an assistant planner in the Partnerships, Technology, and Innovation Unit at SCAG, focusing on a variety of projects and tasks related to broadband, smart cities, the Southern California Clean Cities Coalition, and SCAG's Future Communities pilot program. I'll hand it to you, Shannon, to present.
Great, thank you, Jasper, and thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shannon McAlpine, and yeah, I'm a regional planner in SCAG's Partnerships, Technology, and Innovation Department. And today I'm going to be presenting on the City of Los Angeles's Blue LA Electric Car Share project, which was actually a part of our SCAG's Future Communities pilot program. And I think this project is just a really great example of expanding zero-emission vehicle accessibility in under-resourced communities. All right. So before jumping into the project, I will just give a quick background on SCAG's Future Communities pilot program. Then I'll give some general background information on the Blue LA program, followed by project results, key takeaways, and recommendations for replicating the program in other areas of the region. And then at the end, we'll have a bit of time for Q&A. All right, so starting with that brief overview of the Future Communities pilot program, which is also referred to as FCPP for short. So the FCPP originated in our Future Communities Framework, which was adopted by our regional council back in 2017. And this really just supported and emphasized our role as a leader in tech and innovation. And the framework outlined several program areas and work products, including our regional data platform and also the FCPP. So the FCPP began back in fiscal year 2019. And goals of the program included applying new technologies and data analytics to help reduce vehicle miles traveled and GHG emissions, as well as improving the efficiency of municipal services and also promoting replicable pilots in our Southern California region. And so the FCPP really aligned pilots with our long-range planning regional transportation plan, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with as Connect SoCal. And moving on to the pilot, so there was a total of 8 pilot projects that were awarded under this program. So I will be briefly discussing these. So for Anaheim's Smart Center City project, we partnered with the Anaheim Transportation Network to integrate real-time parking guidance for their Center City area using their transit planning and ride-hailing mobile application, which is called FRAN, and FRAN stands for Free Rides Around the Neighborhood. And for City of Cerritos, they used an online permitting type project to automate their community development related and also business license applications online. So really eliminating that need for residents to physically drive into City Hall to file those. And then I'll be speaking a bit more on Blue LA shortly, but that was a project with the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, LADOT for short, which aimed to verify VMT and GHG impacts, as well as really understand those benefits of car share services. And then for Ontario's Smart City Rapid Validation Hub, that involves creating a real-world technology testing zone. So a few different things that were piloted in their downtown area included broadband, micromobility, and also intelligent trash bin infrastructure. All right, next was City of Glendale. So their route optimization project really included optimizing and redesigning their refuse collection routes using advanced software analytics to help in reducing VMT, GHG emissions, and congestion. And then for Monrovia, their project focused on incentivizing bicycle ownership for city residents and also employees to really help encourage that mode shift behavior. And Riverside's project was actually another example of an online portal type solution. So very similar to Cerritos, it was an online software that was developed to kind of allow community development related permits and applications to be submitted online so that residents didn't have to physically drive into City Hall to file those. And then lastly, San Bernardino County's remote electronics warrant system. That was another online tool specific to officers and judges. So they use that to submit, review, and sign warrants. And this also really reduced the need to travel far distances in the county to all the different county courthouses. All right, so now I'll just be providing a bit of background information on the Blue LA program. So the Blue LA program was launched back in 2018, and it's a one-way station-based EV car sharing program, meaning that members check out a vehicle from one location and then they can either return it to that same location or any other program station in the city. And the program is run by LA DOT, and the network is operated by Blink Mobility. And for the program, before checking out a car, individuals are required to sign up, become a member. And as shown on this slide, all the program vehicles are Chevy Bolts. And these vehicles can be used up for 12 hours. However, they must stay within the counties of Los Angeles, Orange, and Ventura. And additionally, these vehicles must be returned to a station before the battery level reaches 15%. So some goals of the program include providing mobility to city residents with a specific focus on expanding access in low-income communities, also reducing GHG emissions and educating residents on EVs, as well as other sustainable transportation alternatives. And to really encourage this expansion of access, the program also offers discounts to income qualified users, which are referred to in the program as community members. So as you can see here, standard program members pay a monthly membership fee of $5 with a 20 cents per minute rental fee, while the community program members receive a discounted membership fee of $1 with a 15 cents per minute rental fee. And just to give you an idea of the locations, this is kind of a map of all the stations, and they're all located in downtown Los Angeles, Echo Park, Boyle Heights, Chinatown, and Westlake. There's currently 100 vehicles in the program with 40 stations and 200 charging units. All right, so now I'm just going to focus on the Blue LA Electric Car Share Evaluation Project, which was conducted under SCAG's FCPP. So for this project, we partnered with LA DOT to help study, evaluate, and understand program impacts in under-resourced communities. And so the program was evaluated by tracking different key categories for performance over time. These included productivity and utilization, membership and accessibility, and VMT and environmental impacts. And for this evaluation, there was a lot of data gathered, which included system membership information from both the previous and current operators, trip data provided by Blink Mobility, member survey responses, and also member feedback from focus group interviews that were conducted by UCLA. All right, so some project findings related to productivity and utilization included the vehicle typically sees low to moderate utilization, averaging around 84 trips a day, which just showed that the program has capacity to serve even more city residents. Additionally, a small number of stations, so 10 out of those 40 total stations, account for the majority of program trips. And these stations are located in downtown Los Angeles, MacArthur Park, and Koreatown, with each of them seeing over 1,000 annual trips. It was also found that members are substantially more likely to use the service to take longer trips. So the average trip distance was 39 miles for members, lasting a little under 5.5 hours. And then lastly, it was found that this public-private partnership model really helped the city in minimizing costs. And then as shown here on this graph on the left, program trip making typically peaks during the middle of the day, with 35% of trips occurring between 9 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And additionally, the distribution of trip duration shows members use the services to take long trips, as I mentioned before, with 78% being longer than 3 hours and only 5% being less than 1 hour long. So one challenge that was noted was that a small number of stations see the majority of trip making. For this, it was really recommended that capacity be expanded at these high demand stations with adding new chargers and vehicles, and also identifying some strategies to help increase usage at the other underutilized stations. Another opportunity was noted that the tracking trip patterns and station use over time could really help and support making decisions about fleet size changes as well as station expansions. And for this, it was recommended to have a spreadsheet tool for annual reporting and collecting key performance indicators, such as vehicle downtime, active members, and the percent of time stations had no vehicles available. And then one other challenge noted was an irregular exchange in data, since protocols weren't really formalized for all key performance indicators. And so to help address this, it was recommended to create a data sharing schedule with regular data transfer from Blink Mobility, the operator, as well as coordinating with them to obtain any additional information when needed. All right, so next we'll be discussing project findings related to membership and accessibility. So as November 2022, Blue LA had 3,085 members, which is depicted on this graph here. And that was an increase of 154% over 4 years. It was also found that 67% of survey respondents reported being in a zero vehicle household. And additionally, they stated that 30% of trips wouldn't have been made if this program were not available, which just really demonstrated the enhanced access provided by this EV car share program. So additionally, 92% of survey respondents reported being satisfied or very satisfied with the program, and the top reasons being affordability of service, convenience in accessing vehicles, and opportunity to delay or avoid personal vehicle ownership. It was also found that the community members make up 49% of their program membership and actually take over half of the trips. And as shown in the bottom graph, the most common types of trips taken by members were to get groceries and also to conduct personal business. And it was also found that lower income members, so those with household incomes below $35,000, were more likely to use the program for childcare, school, and to visit a place of worship. So one opportunity noted was that many members are multimodal, meaning that they use multiple transportation modes as part of their Blue LA trips. So for this, it was recommended to enable Blue LA payments via tap cards or the developing universal mobility wallet to really help streamline those payments and connections across transportation modes. Another opportunity noted was that individuals in small households without access to vehicles are really like the prime target audience for this service. And so it was recommended that when determining new station locations or how to outreach to kind of grow the membership, to really focus on areas with high percentage of low income households, single person households, and households with limited access to vehicles. And one challenge that was identified was users' concerns with vehicle availability. And so for this, it was really recommended that station occupancy data be reviewed to kind of confirm these concerns, as well as adding new chargers and vehicles at those high demand stations. So now we're going to get into the project findings related to VMT and environmental impacts. And so although VMT increased, given that over half of the program trips were either new or replaced, it was offset by vehicle suppression and shedding, leading to an overall potential reduction of 2.8 VMT per trip. And also for emissions, it was found that program vehicles reduced annual gasoline consumption by nearly 20,000 gallons of gasoline equivalent. And due to the electric nature of the vehicles, that contributed to an approximate 172 metric ton reduction in GHG emissions. So while long-term data isn't really available yet for Blue LA members on vehicle shedding or delayed purchase, responses we got from that 2020 member survey showed that the vast majority, so 98% of respondents, hadn't added a car to their household since joining the program. Additionally, roughly 56% of respondents replaced a trip that otherwise would have been taken using active modes, transit, other modes, or would not have been otherwise made, which, as I mentioned on the previous slide, increases VMT, but that was ultimately offset by vehicle suppression and shedding. Additionally, roughly 38% replaced a trip that otherwise would have been taken using ride-hail. So this is just really consistent with previous studies that have found car share members generally stop using these services once they join a car share program. And lastly, about 7% replaced a trip that otherwise would have been taken in a private automobile, resulting in no VMT change. So one challenge that was noted was that VMT reduction relies on long-term offsets resulting from delayed purchase or vehicle shedding, outweighing VMT increases from car share trips, replacing biking, transit, and other non-automobile travel modes. So a few recommendations were noted for this, including just conducting additional research on the long-term impacts of car share on car ownership, as well as incorporating car share and Blue LA into transportation demand management strategies and development requirements. And another challenge noted was charging and electricity usage data being inconsistent and not something regularly tracked by LADOT. So for this, it was recommended that partnerships with utility providers be strengthened and data sharing procedures be revised so that the electricity usage and cost data can be received. And additionally, it was recommended to maintain charger data with proactive maintenance procedures. And so the project evaluation included key recommendations for successful program replicability within the region. And these included identifying locations with the greatest overlap of zero vehicle households and the potential to support EV infrastructure and adoption, strategic siting of stations in under-resourced communities, working with those local CBOs and multifamily housing complexes to conduct targeted outreach, and offering discounted memberships for low-income residents through grant funding and also public-private partnership savings. So additionally, as part of this evaluation and using SCAG's 2022 plug-in EV site suitability report, portions of our SCAG region were analyzed for their potential to have their own EV car share program. So there were 18 participating cities included in this report, and each got an EV car share readiness score based on the percentage of zero vehicle households intersecting with areas having high and very high EV charging station suitability scores. And additionally, each participating city's infrastructure was categorized into either expanding, progressing, or initiating. So expanding was used for cities with substantially built out EV infrastructure looking to expand into hard to reach areas. Progressing was used for cities with some infrastructure, but with some gaps to fill. And then initiating was used for cities with little to no existing infrastructure. All right, so these 6 cities in the region were identified as having the most potential for an EV car share program. And this table just shows the various factors that played into these recommendations, including the percentage of the city with 5.5% or more zero vehicle households, the average standard EV charging station score, which was pulled from our PEV site suitability report, EV infrastructure status, and also the percentage of the city with high or very high car share readiness. And that 5.5% threshold was selected based off of the experience from the Blue LA program, where all 40 stations had a minimum 5.5% zero vehicle households in the immediate station area. And so after that, the project team just mapped out all of the car share readiness scores on a parcel level for each of the cities to help kind of visually see and identify where deployment would be most useful. All right, and thank you. That concludes my presentation. So on this slide, I've linked both SCAG's FCBP webpage and LADOT's Blue LA webpage, as well as emails for myself and my colleague Marissa Laderack, who is also heavily involved with the FCPP and this project. And she's here as well, so we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shannon. That was a really, really informative presentation. Thank you a lot. So I do have some questions in the chat. I believe Marissa addressed one of them, and I'll just read off for everyone to hear. Did you face pushback from Zipcar over a potential loss of business? Marissa said, this is a great question. In our experience, we were pretty removed from those conversations, but LADOT may have experienced some pushback, but if so, we were not part of that discussion. And then, so another question in the chat, can you explain what you mean by vehicle shedding? And just to confirm, Annalie said, this may refer to people who choose to get rid of their car, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then Jeffrey also asked, and vehicle suppression is just using your vehicle less?
Yeah, so I think with vehicle suppression, that's kind of the idea of waiting to purchase a vehicle. So not necessarily that they have a vehicle and are using it less, but maybe before they were considering purchasing, but because of this program and being able to use it, kind of pushing that off.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. And then we have some more questions just to expand. So what challenges has Blue LA faced in implementation prioritizing underserved communities?
Yes. So I think one big challenge was actually just acquiring new program members, specifically in low income communities. So for this project, the team really focused on conducting extensive outreach, and that included offering free memberships to residents at over 5,000 affordable housing units living within half a mile of the Blue LA stations. However, the team found it to be unsuccessful, which really showed that just focusing on income levels alone wouldn't really lead to those desired member acquisition rates.
Cool, thank you. And then another question, what are some lessons you have learned that could inform the development of similar EV car sharing programs across the SCAG region or across the United States as well?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. So I think one key lesson learned, which relates to the challenge I just mentioned, is really the importance of considering other additional factors, like the number of zero vehicle households and EV preparedness of an area, kind of alongside with income when figuring out next program locations or to start your program. Another lesson learned that I think can be really helpful for other similar programs starting in the region is to really focus on conducting that targeted outreach and working in partnership with local CBOs, as they can really help foster trust with the community members. And I know that the Blue LA program, they do have a steering committee composed of 6 local CBOs that really help lead that community engagement and outreach efforts for their program. But also, I think in addition to partnering with those CBOs, it's really important to have not just intermittent outreach, but also kind of constant on the ground support. And that can be from community champions as well that live in these communities and apartment complexes, as they really have, that deep understanding of community needs and can also help their member or their neighbors learn more about the program and also how to sign up and become a member.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And then I just want to voice something in the chat from Laura Podolsky. So for those that want to dig into the research on Blue LA, Laura pasted some articles in the chat. So if you guys are interested, go ahead and check those out. But thank you so much, Shannon. We can move on to our next presentation now. So our next presentation will be from some folks from the New York City Department of Transportation. So Nick Miller is a program coordinator of low and zero emission vehicle programs at the New York City Department of Transportation, focusing on implementing charging projects across New York City. Nick contributed to the development and implementation of the Plug NYC Curbside Level 2 EV charging pilot and is now leading the expansion of this program. And additionally, Susan McSherry is another presenter. Susan is the Director of Alternative Fuel Programs at the New York City Department of Transportation, focusing on clean fuels and advanced technology vehicle programs, including the Green Fleet Program, also the Plug NYC Curbside Level 2 EV charging pilot, and the expansion of the Clean Trucks Program. Susan led the development of this curbside level 2 EV charging pilot, overseeing the implementation of public curbside level 2 chargers across New York City. So I'll let you guys take it away, and thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Jasper. Hi, everyone. As Jasper said, my name is Nick Miller. I'm Program Coordinator of Low and Zero Emission Vehicle Programs. Just want to say thank you to the Southern California Association of Governments for having us here for this Toolbox Tuesday. I'm going to cover mostly our expansion of the curbside program, but I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Susan to start with a little bit of background and the story behind the pilot.
Sure.
Susan.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, a look back and a look forward. You're getting both sides of it here. So as Nick mentioned, I was involved with, kicking this pilot off. There's 100 public level 2 chargers in the city right now. There's an additional 18 fleet charge points for New York City fleet vehicles that we will not be talking about here because they're not public necessarily, but they are on street. Con Ed selected the operator, who is Flow. That all of that took place, I guess, 2018 and 2019. Of course, we had this little thing called the pandemic in between, which kind of shut down construction for a little while. But finally, we had our MOU in place for the pilot. We began construction in 2021 with all chargers in service by the summer of 2022. So it was very much a long time coming. We also went through what's called the CAPA process to develop a parking regulation, which was EV charging only, and the vehicle, if it's parked in that spot, should be charging, could be hooked into that charger in order to be in compliance, whether they are an EV or not. The price that was agreed upon would be $2.50 peak and $1 off peak. And I believe that's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., right? 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. would be the peak off peak. And if you would like to learn about more of the background of how we got to that point, you can check out the Curb Enthusiasm report that was funded by the New York Energy Research and Development Authority and was conducted by WXY Studios and Barretto Bay Consulting. This is sort of how we got our start as to how we were going to approach this. We also did a curbside charging 18-month evaluation report, and both of those links are there for your viewing pleasure. So next slide, please. Thanks. So 57% of the pilot sites are located in disadvantaged census tracts. And that is more by luck than by design because we basically opened a portal for people to put in locations that they would like to see a charger or not like to see a charger. We only went to communities that we were invited to site in. If we were not invited, we didn't go and we didn't push it. There were a couple of communities, disadvantaged communities, that pushed back against it. So it was a little bit of a mix all over. Many of the pilot sites are in public level 2 charging deserts. And as you can see, half these level 2 chargers in the city are concentrated in the Manhattan core. I couldn't even tell you at what status they're at. I would think a lot of these were installed many, many years ago using ARA funding. They just kind of still show up on the map. They are behind the gate, so to speak, in underground parking garages in the Manhattan core. So that, presents an access issue for people with limited income as well. Next slide. And so just talking about utilization, we got the chargers. The way the pilot was written was when the first charger was operationalized, like turned on and juice was flowing, that began the start of the pilot. So other sites came on, over that course of time. And you can sort of tell by the chart here how utilization has grown. We define that as, percent of time plugged in a full day. Right now in 2024, we have utilization that exceeds 70%, and most sites are above 50, and many are overwhelmingly used, 80%, which is a very high utilization rate, I think, for this type of a program. We have a really good uptime, almost 100%. We have good partners in Flow and in the sort of the boots on the ground guys that will run out there and fix stations that are experiencing faults. The median session time, 3.5 to 4.5 hours. Users pay as they go, pay per hour, as long as they're plugged in. And the data that we're seeing is that energy is being dispensed an average of 80% of the time during the day. So it's busy, and it's showing definitely pressure and the need to grow the program. Next slide. So we decided in 2023, I believe, to conduct a time lapse study. We were sort of concerned about how these spaces operated, in the wild, how are people using them or utilizing them. We did a 39 locations with 72 hours worth of images. Every 5 minutes, we would take an image of the parking space. And so it's about 288 pictures per day per site. It was a lot to kind of grind through, but we had some help with that with a consultant task order with T.Y. Lin, used to be called Sam Schwartz, and they helped us try to visualize how how the spaces and how drivers were behaving and interacting with them. And so what we noticed was not too surprising is that charging peaked midday and overnight. People would, I'm sure it would be a great parking spot to be able to tuck into. You get, very low per hour rate. And, if you're an EV and you're parking in a very busy curb, it's kind of a plum spot. Both legal and illegal parking would peak midday also, but illegal parking is less frequent now overnight. Next slide, please. So, right. So the big issue was how much blocking is going on. We would get 411 complaint system, or is it 311, 411? They would let us know if the spaces were blocked. We had a lot of letter writing back and forth and emailing with constituents that were wanted to gain access but were unable to. So we did see that they were parked in EV parking spaces about half of the observation period. But when they were present, they were plugged in about 65% of the time and blocking the space about 35% of the time. Charging and blocking characteristics varied greatly by location and time of day. And a time-lapse study was conducted to utilizations more than doubled since we did this time-lapse study. Now there is just, frankly, less opportunity to block because the stations are being used so often. I would say that one of the characteristics too is that when the blocking would occur, a lot of times it would be an Uber or somebody like that who was just dropping off and picking up and not necessarily sitting in the spot for a very long time. So there was a lot of turnover and churn. But it just made it a little dicey for an EV driver who would, want some certainty that they would be able to plug in when they pulled up. Next slide. So, yeah, since the start of the program, EV ownership has grown dramatically. We think that the visibility of the curbside chargers kind of helped, at least we hope so. 26% of all EVs in New York State are registered here in the 5 boroughs. But there's a split between BEV and PHEV, 60-40. And most of the majority of the EVs that are registered in New York City are in Brooklyn and Queens, because that's where the cool kids live. For context, it's while we can see the growth of of EVs and utilization, we just have to kind of remain humble and mindful that we have about 1.8 to 2 million units of light-duty vehicles registered in New York City. So it really represents a percent or two of the total overall registration. So we have a lot of work to do. And I think I'll just stop there and I'll hand it off to Nick to talk about ramping up and what we're going to do to address this expansion program.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, now shifting from the pilot and looking at expansion. So again, we've seen a resounding success with the pilot utilization, lots of data to unpack there. But the overarching result that we've seen is this need for curbside charging. And we've identified that curbside charging is going to be a key part of New York City's overall EV charging strategy moving forward. Nearly half of New York City vehicle owners park on street, so they need a place to charge. The pilot performance demonstrates that demand, over 70% system-wide is one of the most subscribed public level 2 charging systems that I at least know of for the entire country. And also we want to further support the Adams administration's commitment to electrifying taxi and for-hire vehicle fleets by expanding this charging for them to use. So a little bit about our expansion strategy. So once we figured out that we want to expand it or that we need to expand it, we identified a set of priorities that we were going to target with this program. So our priorities here are listed on the left side of the screen. We want to target neighborhoods where taxi and limousine commission drivers live. At least 50% of the sites would be in disadvantaged communities. We want to target those high density areas that have limited off-street parking. And we also want to incorporate and integrate with micromobility charging. So think battery charging cabinets for e-bikes, and even the dock stations where someone can plug in their bike on a secured bike parking situation. And this is following this dig once philosophy. So to try and keep project costs down for ourselves and for the teams that are working on micromobility charging, we want to, while we have the sidewalk trenched, we want to make every opportunity that we can while that's right. So the image to the right just shows a little bit of information about where TLC drivers live and operate. So the darker the blue is where more drivers live. So once we identified those priorities, we also identified a larger project area. So understanding those priorities is important for why are certain regions highlighted here or why aren't some regions highlighted. So going back to what Susan shared about where a majority of public level 2 charging is available and what has been built out by the private sector, we're not going to go in the Manhattan core below 60th Street. We're going to focus on the outer boroughs and upper Manhattan as much as possible with this program. And so we have this holistic idea of where we're going to go for the entire city. We've created a project area and we know the bounds of it. So how do we identify what are going to be the priority neighborhoods for us? Where are we going to put more chargers? Where are we going to put fewer new chargers? And so we started to look at data. So we have several different sub-indices that we determined for our priorities. We have things such as equity, EV demand, on-street parkers, for-hire vehicle driver demand, and land use and density. And each of those sub-indices have a specific data set that feeds into that, and you can see those outlined on the right side of the screen here. So for instance, equity is, the data set is comprised of New York City DOT priority investment areas, and of course, disadvantaged communities. And just quickly on what priority investment areas are, this was an effort that the agency went through to identify neighborhoods with higher proportions of non-white and low-income residents, greater population and job job density, and also it's regions that have historically lost significant city DOT investment. So this is our opportunity to provide more investment now with the dollars that we have. And one last point is that we also determined that we want to spread the project out further and not leave them overly clustered within specific neighborhoods. So trying to expand as much as possible and hit as many new neighborhoods as we can. So what happens when you take all of those data sets and all of that information and you aggregate them? You get this image here. So we've weighted each of those sub-indices equally, and we start to see some parcels or geographies that are being prioritized or telling us that they should be prioritized more. So the lighter the green, the less of a priority, the darker the green, the more of a priority, at least for this first phase of expansion. Leave that up for a moment. So we have done a holistic, just like strategic plan, if you will, of what will the program look like, what area of the entirety of the city are we looking at. Now we've determined what neighborhoods are we going to prioritize. And so we're now going to drill down to that lowest layer, which is what do we do when we actually get to the city streets and the city sidewalks. So a big effort that is currently happening is trying to identify those individual locations that we're going to install chargers at. And so just to kind of take a step back, this is using information from the New York City Streets Plan, which has categorized certain streets into these corridor categories. And you can see those on the right side of the screen. We have things like a baseline street, a community connector, et cetera. And then within those, there's a designated sidewalk width, and then these certain slices of the sidewalk. It's broken out into the furnishing zone, the walk lane, and then within the walk lane, there's a designated clear path distance that we must maintain for pedestrian mobility, and that also includes ADA access. When siting for electric vehicle supply equipment or EV chargers, we're going to be looking in the furnishing zone. So that sliver that's closest to the street itself, we're going to be siting these 1.5 feet back from the curb edge at a minimum. We must maintain a 5-foot minimum clear path for pedestrians and mobility device users. We're going to be 10 feet from the corner quadrant. So the corner quadrant is when you're looking at the side of a street and you see the side of the building, it needs to be 10 feet back from there. And we're going to maintain 5 feet minimum lateral distance from a building entrance as per FDNY. And we're also going to maintain 25 feet lateral distance from major buildings. That includes schools and hospitals, for instance, and that is also as per FDNY. So that is generally where we're going to site these. Sometimes it's easier to start with where can't you go than where can you go. So we've determined some disqualifying factors on where are we not going to put these chargers. I won't walk through every single bullet that's on the left side of the screen, but I'll highlight some of those on the top. And these slides will be available. You can access the hyperlinks and all of this information afterwards. But generally, where will we not be locating the chargers? Well, they're not going to be outside the project area. They cannot be within 15 feet of a fire hydrant, and they will not be going within a no parking or no standing zone. Our philosophy for the expansion here is that we're not going to be changing any parking regulations. So any currently designated no parking or no standing zone will not change to be an EV charging only spot. That is the only change we're making to parking regs, is we're adding the EV charging only regulation to the segment. Some other things, we're not going to be putting these on highways, ramps, bridges, or tunnels. We will not be putting these on a street with an existing bike lane unless it's under a viaduct. And we won't be going onto a street with a designated bus lane, again, unless it's under a viaduct. Just an example of what this looks like in real life. Here's an example on the right side of the screen. This was a curbside installation on West 76th Street in the Upper West Side. You can see that the chargers actually in use in this image. Both plugs are being used. It is that 1.5 feet back from the curb edge. It maintains the 5-foot accessible route for pedestrians to use. And also you get a nice side view of the charger. On the left side of the charging unit, that gray box is actually where the breaker and the meter are located. And then there's the charger unit itself is that blue box that's next to it. So just to kind of wrap up this lower level, like what do we do on the street? We actually also created, in a similar vein to the curb enthusiasm report that Susan referenced, we created these site design guidelines with consultant support. And these were to depict the different street typologies, different parking orientations. So parallel parking to 60-degree parking to 90-degree parking on the street, and what does it look like when you install a charger there, and also the different street elements that the charger needs to be installed around. So this image is mainly depicting ADA access. So a driver that uses a mobility device such as a wheelchair, trying to map out the route that they have to take in order to plug in their car if it's on the street side, if the plug on the car is on the street side of the vehicle. Also, the image does show some of the distances that we are trying to maintain from existing furniture, such as 5 feet from a tree pit edge, 1.5 feet from a transformer vault, 5 feet from a Link NYC tower, for instance. Another example of that is outdoor dining. This image has an outdoor dining setup and trying to maintain distances from that as well. It also shows another interesting clearance that we are maintaining. I will say, having identified some of these locations, streets that have a subway entrance on it generally are already crowded enough and don't really have the room for an installation. But if we were to site a charger next to a subway entrance, it has to be a 15-foot radial distance from the entrance itself. And a last example I'll show is the fire hydrant, maintaining that 15-foot distance from it. This also shows the 5-foot clearance from a building entrance, 5 feet from a tree pit edge, and also shows, of course, the 20 feet for each car parking stall that we are citing for these. So each station gets about 40 feet. The charger goes at the 20-foot mark between there to service 2 vehicles, dual plug post. So we've identified neighborhoods, we've identified locations, we have a set of sites. How do we finalize that, and what does outreach look like when we have a set of locations? So we finalize sites after, of course, their individual site assessments. So we have a surveyor that goes out, looks at the location, takes markings down of what the existing conditions are, and then provides a potential or suggested location for the charging unit to go. We take that information, we categorize it, we take all the information, and then we provide that to community boards. And so if you're not familiar with the community board system in New York City, you can see on the right side is images of each of the 5 boroughs. And within them, there are these community board districts, if you will. So neighborhoods are broken out into these community boards. Each have a panel of community members that sit on those boards, and they provide input on anything from EV charging to new bike lanes to new bus lanes or bus routes that are within their jurisdiction. We also conduct conflict checks. So going back to we won't site on an existing bike lane or an existing bus lane. We also don't want to go where a new one is being planned. So we check with all of those units to see if there are any existing conflicts with the locations we've identified. And then when we're nearing construction, we do things like the subsurface investigation. Is there any conflict under the sidewalk itself? Like, is there potentially any Con Ed infrastructure that might be barring us from installing here? Is there any like bulk storage, oil tanks or drums that are under the sidewalk that are barring us from trenching, things of that nature? And then, of course, we send the locations into initial design if they make it through all of that, and then they go into construction. So that's a lot of information. I'm happy to take questions on that. That's kind of the very beginning planning stage, all the way now to picking locations and then trying to get them into construction. So, but with that being said, I'll pass it back to Susan for some concluding thoughts, and then we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Right, forgot about that. Yeah, just to wrap it up, we've found that the pilot is greatly exceeded all expectations. We really had no idea it was going to be that much of a hit, but it was also, pressure put on it by TLC mandates to go all electric. There's been a huge jump in BEVs in the for hire vehicle industry here. That's been very helpful in increasing usage. That registrations, again, they've increased over the 300% since the pilot inception. But, again, like I said, we're trying to be humble about it because we know that that is really just a very low percentage of overall New York City vehicle registrations. And the utilization helps, with the justification for expanding. Now that, the cat's out of the bag and we're seeing this kind of utilization and pressure, we're hitting up on the ceiling of this. We would be it would be remiss of the city to slow down growing curbside charging as registrations are growing. We've sort of shifted, as Nick said, from working on targeting certain fleets and like where the TLC drivers live, et cetera. Initially, the program was really to test out the different typologies. Would we get more use of a station if it was near what we would call eds and meds, like a school or a hospital, versus a side street off of an avenue shopping, commercial shopping. So it's much more targeted now in the way the rollout is going to occur, and we need to work with stakeholders. There's still a lot of pushback on losing parking, quote unquote, but we have to be able to message that the growth of EV registrations and the use of the curb where your TLC driver neighbor is parking their car overnight. So this could be then, change a space into an EV parking space. You're really not losing anything to begin with. So, and then working with the community leaders, the community boards are all, they all have their own different personalities and some are more interested than others. And so it's just working through those community groups to get the buy-in. So, so I think that's it.
The end
Nick,
of
do you
our
have any
slides.
final? Thank you. There you go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Happy to take questions.
Thank you guys so much. So we do have some questions in the chat. So Jeffrey, I see you commented a few questions. Would like to give you the opportunity to come off mute and ask them. But if you don't want to come off mute, I can just read them off the chat.
Yeah, so the first question, so given that there is a lot of demand for curbside space, like Amazon delivery, rideshare pickups, bus stops, etc. I mean, I know you decided not to locate stations where there is bus lanes and bike lanes, but nonetheless, what made you decide it's best to target your program on curbside parking as opposed to off-street parking spaces?
There's a little of both. There was a sort of a limited, I think it was more limited by funding for a while, but limited by interest too in the early days to get some parking, DOT owns several parking lots and garages. We had a small, I wouldn't call it a pilot, but it was just a small number of level 2 charges in those stations. And that program has grown considerably to the installation of several EV charging hubs, including 150 kW, a couple of 50 kWs, a couple of level 2 chargers within those parking lots and garages. Nick, do you know? I know there's White Plains will be the third one, I believe, that will open. That's White Plains Road in the Bronx, very close to the Bronx Zoo. There is one on the Lower East Side here at the Essex Street parking garage, and the third one is in Court Square in Queens. So we're trying to, basically do both. And as Nick said, we're trying to now with On Street to try to combine some of the other goals of the agency on micromobility to do the dig once approach and try to, get a nice grouping of those different mobility options in the same place. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I put in the chat the New York City DOT municipal parking facilities webpage that they outline where charging is currently available. You are right, Susan. The next location to open will be White Plains Road in the Bronx. We're closing in pretty close to opening that, so keep an eye out for more information on that. I will say you are correct, Jeffrey, that there is a lot of demand for curbside space. I mean, it is like the next frontier, if you will, in New York City and in infrastructure planning and installation. So we have a very close relationship with all of these units within DOT. So you brought up Amazon deliveries. So having the delivery drop-off locations is something that's done by our freight mobility unit, and we talk to them very regularly on where they're planning those locations. I've already mentioned bus lanes and bike lanes and our discussions with those units and trying to plan with each other. I will say that one last piece that I forgot to mention during the planning is that we've found that the best place or the place with the most space for an EV charging installation is going to be on what we call the spur streets, which is if you think of a major travel corridor or destination corridor, such as Amsterdam Avenue, for instance, in Manhattan, on the Upper West Side, we're not going to install or we found that it's very difficult to find a place to install chargers on Amsterdam Avenue. So we go to the side streets or segments that are right off of that street to install a charger, and it's generally less crowded. We get less conflicts with bike lanes and bus lanes, with delivery drop-off locations. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of conflicts to work through, and we have to talk to our colleagues pretty regularly to ensure that we're not overlapping with each other and conflicting. So it's all part of our planning process, though.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then my next question is, you mentioned that you wouldn't install these stations on a street with a bike lane or a bus lane, except where there's a viaduct. And I'm trying to understand, maybe I'm not seeing something logistically, but how does a viaduct make an exception to that rule?
Additional width.
Exactly.
That's, without conflict. It's just open space underneath the, overhead highway ramps and et cetera. So it gives an opportunity. That's sort of for DOT parking, kind of a last frontier also. They haven't really been well signed or well regulated. It's been a lot of times just free parking and free car storage. And the city and various agencies are really looking to activate that type, those locations and that typology for various reasons, including connections, segment connections on the bike for the bike route network, just activating, little flea markets, little, fun things, that to do with the kids, all these various variety of ways that we want to use that space. It's really, untapped and really the agency is working very closely on taking a look at that and making the best sort of changes to it that will be a real value and benefit to the communities.
Yeah. Like Susan said, the extra width gives you more space to do things with. It also means that those locations aren't really standardized per se, like a baseline street, if you will, like 76th Street. So it's not that we're outright trying to just install under viaducts. It just means that we're not outright excluding them, and we of course have to look at those on a site by site basis and make sure that we're again we can install either alongside the bike infrastructure, the bus infrastructure, and we're not overlapping or causing any hazards with it.
It's kind of the sweet spot because it's like off street, on street, because it's not in front of anybody's house or business, but yet it is, part of the network.
We have 2 installations from the curbside pilot that are under the BQE, the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. So that's an elevated structure, and we have parking facilities under those, and we installed a few chargers within those facilities.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for your answers. We do have another question in the Q&A function. So let me see. Did that work for showing the question? Okay, maybe it didn't. Let me copy it and paste it in the chat. Okay, so this was a question from our Q&A function. How does your framework address the potential for grid strain and uneven energy burden in disadvantaged communities as public charging infrastructure expands, particularly in areas with older electrical grids or where residents already face disproportionately high utility costs?
Great question. I guess from the days of the pilot was really Con Ed and Flow and DOT giving them the permission to site on the sidewalk. We chose the locations. They chose whether or not they were feasible. And a lot of that did concern whether or not there was enough power for the site. So we had a very long list of, lat longs and, pictures of these locations that we thought would be great, but would fall through. So it is a huge screening and vetting process to get to, that intersection of a great site to put a charger in and the available power. But that said, there is the Con Ed, and I'm sure, your utilities have the Power Ready program. So we will be working now as we transition off the pilot, right? So we had no responsibility. We just allowed them to locate, and at the end of the pilot, remove them and make the sidewalk, put the sidewalk back to normal. We were allowed to have an extension of 1 year, which is giving the team time to set up an extended contract to continue the flow charging capability while we stand up a bigger RFP that may or may not be Flow as the prime vendor, but would take on this many hundreds of stations that we're looking to expand and grow into that network. Yeah, I mean, with Flow and Con Ed, they kind of made the choice. We gave them the options, and they picked the choices that work best for them as far as power goes.
I'll also just, I guess, answer on uneven energy burden or energy distribution. I'd say that this actually goes back to a question we are frequently asked is, well, why not fast charging solely? Like, why even focus on level 2 charging? And the we have seen private industry, the Teslas and the Rebels, building supercharging sites in the outer boroughs. So, you know, there's Revel sites and planned Revel sites that are going up in Queens and Brooklyn. There's Tesla sites that are also in those two boroughs, and they pull a lot of energy. I mean, there is, of course, megawatts of energy that need to go in to feed these stations, and that's the main thing, is that what we're providing with level 2 charging is something that puts a little less strain on the grid. Consumers and residents don't have to worry as much about demand charges and when you're using level 2 chargers versus DCFC chargers. So that is why level 2 is a core part of the strategy, is that when you don't need to get a charge in 30 minutes, you can plug in when you get home at the end of your shift, if you're a Lyft or Uber driver or a yellow cab driver, and then you'll have a full charge when you get up the next morning to go back to work. And that's kind of that is what we're trying to address, is we're filling that charging need and providing that opportunity for people that don't have a garage or a driveway to get that overnight charging available to them.
Yeah, thanks so much for answering that question. So I'm just going to flash this on the screen, but we can, so any participants, if you'd like to fill out that survey on the screen, but I do want to get to some questions from Annalie, if you would like to voice them.
Yeah, just some really quick clarification questions. Thanks for your guys' presentation. Susan, you were talking about utilization. I was wondering if EV blocking included, like, say you know, come home from your shift and you plug in your car, but then you don't move it the next morning. Like, is there a point at which, like, the charging has ended and you're still technically plugged in, but you're then blocking the spot? Is that included?
As long as the vehicle's plugged in, that's that's what gets telegraphed to the parking enforcement agent. They're walking by and they see that the cord is attached, they will not ticket them. There were, some I would say we talked about overstay fees, but they're not significant enough that people would jump out of bed, in the middle of crack of dawn to move the car. I think it's just the cost of doing business in the city. But yeah, but the blocking, as long as we just counted, as long as if it was plugged in, we're good. That's it.
And
Yeah.
as long as the driver's plugged in, they're paying as well. So
Right.
as long as that
Right.
plug is, as long as the plug is in the car, you're paying for that. So
Got it.
that's the $1 overnight, $2.50 during the day.
Got it.
And I will
And it's per hour, not per kilowatt. So
yeah,
Right.
it's per
yeah,
hour.
that'll be another sort of change that we'll have to look at, is charging by kilowatt as opposed to by time.
Mm.
And how to dynamically do that. That's like that, I guess, a presentation for another day.
I'll just
go
I
ahead.
just want to quickly add that also overstay really isn't as, I think, big of an issue in the curbside pilot. I've been looking at the utilization data, and we have medium recharge rates versus medium session rates. So like the recharge is energy being distributed to the vehicle, and then the session is the entire length of time that you've been plugged in. And so you can calculate out from that the median difference between the two, and it comes out to, usually it varies site by site, but it's, I think, on average about 30 minutes. So someone's only really staying plugged in on average about 30 minutes over the time when they stop receiving energy from the plug.
Huh. That's good data point. I have one more question. I know we're over time, but was there any consideration in putting chargers in existing ADA spaces and then maybe like loosening restrictions? I know you had a lot of accessibility considerations for your siting, but wondering about like current ADA spaces. or ADA restricted spaces?
So curbside, just general street parking. I don't believe there's ever an ADA designated spot on the street
Right.
itself, right, Susan? So
Right.
like,
It's a tag
yeah.
on the
Um,
windshield.
Yeah, but I'm saying like there's no like painted marking
Oh yeah,
on
no.
the street itself that says this is ADA only parking.
Correct.
That's only in our in lots that are off the street. Um, I will say that when it comes to citing an ADA accessible spot on the street, we're targeting the spot that is closest to the pedestrian ramp at an intersection, so that someone with a mobility device can easily access that if they need to, and also they can try however they need to maneuver to try and plug in their car, however it's oriented. We have experimented. Well, we went through an exercise when we were developing the design guidelines on cord length and what's the optimal cord length to reach all the ports on the car, depending on where the charger's installed. The pilot charger cords are 22 feet. Is that right,
So,
Susan? They're 22
yeah.
feet. And that there are certain ports that can't be reached at that length, but you can try and orient the car as best you can to reach them, or try and find a charger that's on the same side, where you can park on the same side where the plug is, if that makes sense. But yes, that first spot closest to the intersection is where, and we're trying to make sure that there are minimum to no obstructions from other existing furniture. So like, we don't want to put a charger right next to where a tree
Right.
pit is if we want to make that a ADA accessible spot. So
Yeah, great. That was some really great questions and answers. Thanks for all of your time, and thank you so much to our amazing speakers for sharing your work with us. Thanks to NYC DOT and also SCAG, Shannon. So also thank you to all the participants. I hope all the audience found the session useful. And of course, on the screen, we would like to invite you to take a brief 2-minute survey to help us support future Toolbox Tuesdays. And the link is also in the chat. So, and a special thanks to Jennifer Martinez, Amanda McDaniel, Jeannie Ma, Anita Au, and Annalie Ekman, and all of the SCAG staff who helped us put together this session. And so thank you to everyone, and I hope you stay safe and healthy, and have a great day. We can end it there. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for the opportunity.
thank you very
Nice
much.
speaking with you. Take care.
Thanks. And thanks, Jasper. Great facilitation.
Yes, thank you very
you.
much. Take care, all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.